It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back at the Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew version 1.0 deck just to Commander in front of us and my quest out brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. This week we are starting our Innistrad Remastered content, covering a bunch of commanders from Innistrad's history, celebrating this set. And Edgar Master did one thing, which was probably reprint the most expensive commander ever printed for Innistrad, although it wasn't printed in Innistrad's set. And that is Edgar Markov. As always, the deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, so I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out the links. I really appreciate it. Edgar is a Mardu Vampire Knight that says whenever you cast another vampire spell, if he's in the command zone or on the battlefield, you get a 1/1 vampire creature token. Eminence and the original Eminence commanders are here, and it's back in regular frame, this showcase frame, and then a poster frame. So hopefully this will drop the price of Edgar just a little bit. First strike and haste. Whenever it attacks, you put a counter on each vampire you control. The truth is, Markov's a pretty straightforward commander. We want to cast cheap vampires to make tokens. We want to take advantage of the fact that we're making tokens, and when Edgar finally gets out, he wants to lead those tokens and those vamps into battle and just hit as hard as we can. We're in great combat colors in Mardu. We're in great colors in white and red for some tokens. I think overall, Markov just comes down to how much do you want to spend. Here on Millsy Brews, the budget is about $300 to $350, so we'd have to take some concessions on some of the vampires, but the truth is, I think we've got a solid mid-range deck list that's going to do what we want Edgar to do. All right, let's get into our vampires. There's a lot of options here, but the truth is we want to go as low to the ground as we can so we can get as many of those 1/1s as we can. Blood Artist, a classic vampire, new showcase frame in Innistrad Remastered. Whenever another creature, this or another creature dies, target player loses life when we gain a life. The classic aristocrat style effect. Bloodthirsty adversary might look odd to some people, but I like it as an option both early game and late game. Early game, it's just a 2-mana 2/2 with haste. I can get in and attack, and it's got a half decent body as a 2/2. But as the game goes on, you could pay 2 and a red any number of times, and when you do, you put that many counters on it and exile up to that many target instant sorceries with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard and copy them and pay them without paying their mana cost. I like this as an option because mid to late game you could get some removal back out of your graveyard with it, or you know, you have some options for play here. It's not just a 2-mana 2/2. Well, although it's a 2-mana 2/2 on the right side of it, Charismatic Conqueror is definitely a house of value on its own. Whenever an artifact or a creature enters the battlefield untapped under your opponent's control, they can tap it. If they don't, we get a 1/1 with lifelink. And this is one of those cards that if our opponents aren't careful can get really out of hand, making a ton of them for us. Cordial Vampire, whenever it or another creature dies, not even our creatures, just any creature dies, put a counter on each vampire we control. You get very out of hand, especially when we start getting into combat, forcing our opponents to block. Cruel Celebrant, whenever it or another creature or planeswalker we control dies, each opponent loses one and we gain one. Again, you're going to see a couple of these abilities in the deck stack up. Drana, flying first striking 2/3. Whenever it deals common damage to a player, we put a counter on each attacking creature you control. This is really nice because since it has first strike, it can hopefully hit before the rest of our vampires, giving them that nice buff right in the combat that they're in. Falcon Wrath Gorger says that each vampire creature card you own that isn't in the battlefield has madness, and its madness cost is equal to its mana cost. This is just here because a lot of red draw is discard then draw, right? This will give options to pitch vampires, but still be able to cast them for their madness cost. Forerunner of the Legions, always a great vampire because when it comes in, you get to search your library for any vampire and put it on top, which is great, right? Go in to get one of your choice. And then whenever another vampire comes in, you can give a creature +1/+1 until end of turn, picking a key creature and really buffing it. Gifted Aetherborn, 2-mana 2/2, or 2-mana 2/3, sorry, Death Touch Lifelink, a great body, especially without lifelink as we're trying to make our vampires bigger and bigger. Indulgent Aristocrat could pay 2 and sack a creature to give a counter to each vampire we control. Again, sacrifice one of those 1/1s that you're making with Markov to grow the rest of the board. Knight of Ebon Legion has the option to give itself a buff, but at the beginning of our end step, if a player lost 4 more life this turn, we get to put a counter on it. It'll grow up a little bit. Again, a 1-mana 1/2 is great, especially when it's going to grow over the course of the game. Legion Lieutenant, just giving all our other vampires +1/+1. Again, great when we're trying to go wide. Same thing with Markov Baron. Again, just trying to help us go wide and deal some good damage to our opponents. Master of the Dark Rites can take those 1/1 vampires and sacrifice them to add 3 black mana. Again, you can only use it to cast vampire, cleric, or demon spells, but since we have so many vampires in the deck, that's going to be great to turn those tokens that Edgar's making into black mana for us. Mavin Vrain says whenever one or more non-token vampires we control attack, make a 1/1. So just a 1/1 vampire with lifelink each turn as we're attacking. Same thing on Preacher the Schism. Whenever it attacks the player with the most life or tie for the most life, we get to make a 1/1 vampire. And then whenever it attacks while we have the most life or tie for the most life, we draw a card and lose a life. So great abilities on it. 2 force, not bad with Death Touch, great blocker. And again, more 1/1s to add to the mix of our board. Rakish Air will allow us to put a counter on every vampire that deals combat damage to a player. This is great, again, as we're going wide to start buffing those 1/1s to be even bigger for our opponents to deal with. Sanguine Evangelist is going to give all of our creatures Battle Cry, which is great. And then when it dies, we get a bat. The bats are, of course, not going to really be able to take advantage of some of this vampire synergy, but the bats are bodies that can be used to be sacrificed to other things. That is always important. Stromkirk Captain, going to give all of our other vampires +1/+1 in First Strike. Again, First Strike is a great ability, and we will happily take it because it makes a lot of the interactions that our opponents are going to want to get into us in combat even better when we can block and our creature survives and theirs dies. Vampire the Dire Moon, Death Touch Lifelinker, 1 mana, 1/1, perfect. A great cheap body with great abilities that's going to get better as it grows. Vampire Socialite, a 2/2 for 2 with Menace that says whenever it comes in, if an opponent lost life this turn, you put a counter on each other vampire control. This is a great ability, right? After combat, we've already attacked, have it come in, spread a counter around. And then as long as an opponent lost life this turn, each other vampire you control enters the battlefield with a counter on it. So not a bad way to kind of say, hey, maybe we play our vampires after combat and get those counters spread around in the process. Vengeful Bloodwith, another one of those Blood Artist style abilities. Whenever this creature or another creature we control dies, target opponent loses life, we gain a life. Again, these abilities aren't bad to have around, considering we have so many of these tokens laying around that are probably going to end up dying, right, via combat or other abilities. Welcoming Vampire is going to draw us a card the first time a creature's power 2 or less comes in. Again, perfect for Markov's ability, right? Making sure that we hopefully get at least 1 draw every turn. And then Yahenni says that whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we get to put a counter on Yahenni. And then we could sack another creature to give Yahenni indestructible. Again, we're going to have a lot of those 1/1 vampires laying around. So Yahenni should be able to stay indestructible. Hopefully take some things out and grow and become a real threat on its own. So we kind of talked about the vampires. Let's talk a little bit about tokens mattering. The truth is, I think these effects aren't really about tokens. It's mainly more about vampires. But there's a couple that do care about tokens. Baron Bertram from OTJ says whenever 1 or more tokens come in under our control, we make another vampire. Again, perfect, right? Because we're going to be making one hopefully every turn. And you can pay to sack a creature to draw a card. Sanctum Seeker is going to says whenever a vampire we control attacks, each opponent loses 1 and we gain 1. So all those tokens attacking, right, will lead to more Sanctum Seeker triggers, right, as we're getting into combat. It makes, I think, Seeker a whole lot more worth it in the mid-game. And then, of course, the classic Caretaker's Talent. If you've been anywhere about token decks, I'm sure you've seen Caretaker's Talent. Whenever 1 or more tokens come in under our control, we draw a card. It only happens once per turn. Level 2 can allow us to make a copy of a token if we need to, and then level 3 buffs all of our tokens. So not a bad card. I mean, the top ability is what we really care about. This is another kind of copy of that Welcoming Vampire for us, but it just gets better as the card goes on. But the truth is, I think it's easy to just spawn the vampires. I think where the deck really needs to take control is making the vampires difficult to deal with. You have things like Patchwork Banner, giving all the vampires a buff and giving us an extra mana. I think Cathar's Crusade goes especially well here. Whenever a creature comes in, put a counter on each creature we control, and grow the whole board as we're getting in that. Cover Darkness can give all of our vampires fear, meaning they can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or black creatures. That may seem like not that much of an upside, but the truth is it can help a ton depending on what we're playing against and knowing where we can attack those in, right? Sharing Animosity, giving a buff to all of our creatures for each other creature that's attacking with it that shares a type. A great way to turn those 1/1s into 4/1s, 5/1s, 6/1s, right? As they're getting in and dealing some combat. Stancia Masquerade gives all of our vampires that are attacking first strike, which is great, and then has that Falcon Wrath ability where a rakish ability where whenever one hits, it puts a counter on it, which is great. I mean, both of those abilities are great on one card, making sure that we're hitting hard. And then War Leader's Call, giving the buff, but then dealing out a damage whenever another creature comes in. So we kind of get these Impact Tremor style abilities, but we're adding that buff on top of it. But I've said it before in the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at Edgar. And there's a lot of things we can learn in testing, mainly with our budget, right? The truth is I had to avoid a couple vampires just due to their cost. Thankfully, Captivating Vampire just got its reprint here in Innistrad Remastered, so hopefully the cost comes down. But it's a really great creature, giving all of our other vampires a buff and allowing us to tap 5 untapped vampires to gain control of a creature, and that becomes a vampire. It's just a great ability, especially when we're getting so many, vampires across the course of the game. I think Bloodletting of Akalazotz feels great here. The truth is, its problem is just a $25 card. If your opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much instead. It's a great card, right? It's a great vampire. It's flying. I love it. It was just hard to work it into the budget when you're trying to keep yourself on so much of a budget, and your commander still, at the time of recording, costs $60. And Eldrazi Monument, giving all our creatures flying and indestructible, but at the beginning of our upkeep, we have to sack a creature. I really like Eldrazi Monument, especially in a deck where you're trying to go wide anyway. The truth is, I just couldn't fit the budget in, but I think it's a great card that could replace some other +1/+1 buffs, especially for that flying and indestructible. Indestructible is great, right? Helping to protect our board. Let's get into our playtest. That's what we love to do here on the channel, and let's enjoy it. Given a 3-lander with a Orzhov Signet, Vampire of the Dire Moon, Aristocrat, and Knight Evans. We got some cheap vampires to get the process going. We got 4 mana, so we just need 1 or 2 more, right, to get to Edgar. I don't mind this hand at all. We'll play the Command Tower. And note that this Tainted Peak is going to be colorless at the moment because we don't have a swamp. We'll have to kind of think about that as we go. I think we'll just Knight and make that vampire. Remember that Edgar has that Eminence ability, and that's what makes it so good, is that we don't need him out to make those vampires. And we're just going to keep making as many as we can. We'll get the Tainted Peak in. The Orzhov Signet. Does it make sense to do that, or does it make sense to double vampire this turn? Right? Because we could vampire Indulgent Aristocrat, right? Double vampire. I guess that's an option. I guess the truth is, if I Orzhov Signet, I'm out this turn on mana, right? So, because I'd have nothing to put into the Signet. So maybe that makes the most sense. We might potentially have to take next turn off a little bit, depending on what other land we hit. Maybe we take the attacks here on turn 2 with a couple of these if we want to. But otherwise, we're really right, just setting up the board where we can pay 2 to grow all of our vampires a little bit too. Well, there's the Clifftop Retreat. Unfortunately, it's got to kind of come in tapped at this point because we don't have a swamp or a... we don't have an island, or sorry, not island, a plains or a mountain. The truth is, this is just an odd hand for ramp, or for mana, right? I think we probably just play the Clifftop Retreat, get the Signet in, and, well, we could do that, or we could play the Peak. I forgot, we have white on the Command Tower. What am I thinking? I was like, we need the white for Sanguine. I think we use those for the Signet, put this into the Signet, sack a vampire, give all these a counter. Right, start growing some of these so that way they become a real threat, right, through the process. Maybe we can take some tax here on turn 3 and just work our way up. Again, we're still, this is just represents 4 mana, so this would be 5, this would be 6, right? So I think we just Clifftop Retreat here, put down the Stromkirk Captain, giving all of these guys first strike, take another attack this turn. Sorry, that makes another vampire. Now we're working our way up towards still having some good options for the Aristocrat. We can hopefully get Edgar down this next turn, right? Play the unclaimed territory and then play Edgar. Now, remember that Edgar doesn't make a 1/1 vampire when it casts itself, but you're okay because you're going to immediately go into combat and put a counter on each vampire you control right in combat. And remember that they all have first strike because of Stromkirk Captain, right? So, although he already does, everybody else does. So this is going to be a great attack this turn on turn 5. A lot of bodies. And going to be really helpful for us. Hopefully we can kick it into our next turn here. Again, missing that swamp. But I think the truth is here, you look to do something like Crackling Doom, try to take out some of our opponent's things, get some damage in. We could play the Evangelist if we want to. But the truth is, I think I leave mana up for Indulgent Aristocrat, just attack again. Because if anybody takes any blocks that truly do kill a vampire, use the mana to sacrifice it, grow the rest of them, right? And just, this is an engine that's going to start taking over as long as we can protect it, right? And if Markov ever goes back, it stinks, but hopefully we can get him back out, for 8 mana. The nice thing is he has haste, so he should be able to do something turn it comes down. But I think this is what you really want to see. Good board state, get the buffs in, and get going. So I think that looks good for the first playtest. Let's get into the second one. Here we're seeing a 3-lander with a Indulgent again. Shadow Alley Denizen, which says whenever another black creature comes in, target creature gains Intimidate. Remember that all the tokens that Markov makes are black. So Intimidate is a creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or creatures that share a color with it. So it's important to know who we want to give Intimidate to. And then Forerunner of the Legion, which can go get a vampire of our choice. So not a bad starting hand by any means. So we don't need the caves this turn, so I think we'll just play the Swamp and the Aristocrat, right? Get it down, get it started, get our 1/1. And we draw a Vengeful Blood Witch. Again, a great one to add to the board. I mean, Denizen makes sense as well. I guess if there's a better attack this turn, maybe we Denizen. But the truth is, I think I would... I guess it's one vampire either way, right? I guess we'd only get one Intimidate trigger. I'm just kind of thinking of the Blood Witch. That way when we start to attack, we have that ability as a threat. Turn 3, we see the Path to Exile, not bad. I think I'd Forerunner of the Legion, make the vampire, and then just start to think about what it is that we want to see from what do we want here as our vampire. I mean, I like the idea of something like Sanctum Seeker to just start literally dealing damage next turn, right? Play the Sulfur Springs, and now we're dealing, 6 that next turn, right? Life on just attack. That's my thought. I'm sure there's other better options, but in the back of my head, that's what I'm thinking. So Sanctum Seeker, make another vampire. We'll have Forerunner of the Legion give Blood Witch and Aristocrat a +1/+1 this turn because of its ability. And then just attack, right? 6 triggers. Everybody loses 6. We gain 6. Hopefully they don't take blocks. Hopefully we can try to find a way. If not, maybe a couple of the 1/1s die in the process. But the point is that hopefully we can get some attacks in. But really we're just getting that Sanctum Seeker trigger off. Turn 5, I think we just Denizen plus Vampire. Again, hand a couple of buffs. I just realized that Denizen won't see the token for itself right off of our Markov cast. But here the goal is to leave up the Dawntress and just attack. Now you have 8 triggers this turn from Sanctum Seeker. So in 2 turns, we've dealt 14, plus just the combat we're getting into. We actually do leave up enough mana for the Aristocrat to sack at least 2 creatures, right, if we wanted to. We got 4 mana, so we could sack 2, +2/+2. I like this scenario. Obviously, you want to leave something like the Dawn's Truce up to protect your board. So maybe we just do 1 vampire, even if it doesn't, block the one that gets blocked, give the counters around, and maybe that helps some of these guys survive, right? But the truth is, now Sanctum Seeker is a problem that our opponents have to deal with. That's why I kind of leave up that Dawn's Truce to just protect the board, see if we can squeak out. And on the next turn, if nothing changes, we're doming people for probably 8 or 9, and then that's 20 damage over the course of 3 turns, and you can just see where this can get very difficult for your opponents to deal with if they're not having removal at the right time. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with that Gorger, the Vampire of the Dire Moon, and Markov Baron. So Markov Baron's kind of an interesting one. It gives the buff, it has lifelink, and it has Convoke, which is nice. I'm thinking turn 1 we just get the Outpost down. It's going to be kind of odd no matter what, and I think we just kind of need to get it down for the purposes of making sure that we have good mana. Here on turn 2, I guess we have an option, do we? Kind of thinking what? Dire Moon and Gorger? Make 2 vampires. I was just trying to make sure I use the black and then any else. Here, next turn, I'm kind of thinking of getting into the Patchwork Banner, unless we draw something better. Ooh, we see Caretaker's Talent, but I don't think I can activate it this turn, can I? Well, I could, right? I could play the Caretaker's Talent and convoke out a Markov Baron. Does that make the most sense for this turn, or do you go into the Patchwork Banner into the Denizen, right, and get another Vampire? That's what I'm thinking, because then you buff the entire board, right? Maybe we could go take Caretaker's Talent into Baron next turn and just use the tokens. Was my thought, because here 5 mana, we're still one off Markov. My thought here is Caretaker's Talent. You could actually gift it Aetherborn, Mega Vampire, and use the vampires to get Markov Baron down. That draws us a card, right? Because of Caretaker's Talent. Ooh, Skull Clamp's great. Unfortunately, we just got out of it with that Patchwork Banner, but it could still be useful, right? Depending on what we do. But now all of our vampires are getting a +2/+2 buff, and except Markov Baron, which is getting +1/+1. So now these are all 3/3s, right? Pretty great attacks this turn we can do on turn 4. And our hope here is we top a land. We don't, which is a-okay. We can cast the Hucker and do that, or we could just completely level up Caretaker's class, draw a card, get the +2/+2 buff, which is kind of my thought. So make a copy of the Vampire, and then make a copy of the Vampire to have 4 mana left, use one of it to place Soul Ring, then level Caretaker Talent up. All right, so now +3/+3, +4/+4 to the tokens, +2/+2 to these still, right? Those only affect tokens, but now again, great attack, and then next turn, right, we are in the zone to play Markov and get the party going. Again, not a high budget Markov list, but I think still a good budget to go wide, have some good pieces for combat, and have a good time. But let me know, what do you think of my Markov list down in the comment section below? Are you going to give Markov a shot now that it's gotten a little bit cheaper? I think we're going to start to see some more Markov decks built now that it's gone from hopefully 100 down a little bit more. I mean, as of the recording, it says 55. We'll see if it drops a little more than that. But thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.